Who's Aaron? I only see Mara.
Got it.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order at 7:32 p.m. This is a work session. It's a more informal meeting. We have discussions and try to. Councilmember Sadiq, you lost your costume. Okay, very good. Glad to see you back. So this is an informal meeting. We try to have discussions, hash out issues, discuss things, and but we still are, at least in principle, governed by Robert's rules. But let's go ahead. We don't need to take any votes tonight. So are any amendments required of the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I would just remind you, sir, that we will not have the presentation this evening on the walk bike trucks. And we'll have that ready for next week.
Okay, that sounds good. Are there any other changes? I was thinking that if one of the council members on the Town Seal Design Committee was interested in discussing that, we could sneak it in somewhere, or either of you could cover it in your reports. So that was my thought.
I can cover it in report.
Okay, that sounds good. I just thought it'd be nice to get an update. It was a good meeting. Okay, I have a pretty short mayor's report this evening. First, happy Halloween. And I hope that everybody else was able to snag a little bit of candy out of the bowl. So I had a good parade of costumed children who went by, and had to break off to come and start this meeting. But fortunately, I have other family members that will hopefully get rid of all the rest of the candy so that I don't have to eat it myself. So that's good. Hopping over to a somewhat more serious topic, the COVID pandemic. We are still perhaps in the trough between waves, but it's looking like things are turning up a little bit. The data just from last week saw consistently higher numbers than previous weeks, and looking like they're increasing as the week went on. So I think we all need to consider what we're doing, consider staying safe. One sort of interesting development, just me digging through the CDC website, is that, and also there's a press briefing from the White House, that the CDC seems to be thinking that the transmission is mostly through the airborne, and maybe not so much from fomites. It's still a good idea to wash your hands, and some of the other nasty respiratory viruses that are still going around out there, the flu, the RSV. Then it's good to wash your hands, but I would focus more on breathing clean air, whether you have to filter it or stay outside, or just stay away from large crowds of people. All of those are the best ways to avoid catching it. And in anticipation of this wave, which everyone's been predicting to come sort of at the end of November, early December, then the town is on the edge of distributing a new round of N95 masks for all residents. So I hope that town manager will discuss that in his report. And my last topic is that we are in the middle of early voting. Today was the count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th day of early voting. Early voting is open for another 22 minutes today, and it will be open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday until 8 p.m., 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. each of those 3 days. And then next Tuesday is election day, and that's your last opportunity. I hope that everyone carefully considers who they want for these important offices that are on the ballot right now, and gets out and votes. And that wraps up my report for tonight. Thank you. Let's move on to the town manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council and the community. I have a few items this evening. first, happy Halloween. And I hope everyone has enjoyed their trick or treating, or if they're still doing it, that they're doing it safely. We held the final walk and talk on the 22nd, and it was a good walk. We had really good participation from residents, and that was the final walk and talk of the season. We will resume these community walks in the spring of 23. Now, replacing those will be some virtual meetings for community conversations. And the first community conversation, the virtual meeting, will be held on November the 12th. That's a Saturday at 9:30 in the morning via Zoom. And the topic covered is the redistricting, the town redistricting of the wards. The the Legacy MUTC meeting is scheduled for November 2nd at 7:30. And they'll be discussing the lofts at Riverdale Park. That's the proposed development on the southwest corner of Queensbury and Rhode Island Avenue. The link for that, Director Barnes, correct me if I'm wrong, the link for that will be on the town's website, and we'll also promote that through our social media. I think there's a lot of community interest in that topic. The town steel redesign committee met last week, and they have another meeting scheduled for November 10th. That meeting is also held virtually, and the link for that will be on the town's website as well. On Veterans Day, which is the 11th, there's a wreath laying at 11 a.m. There's no in-person ceremony, but the mayor will be preparing his comments in a video message that will be shared with the community through all the town's various social media platforms. The mayor asked about the mask, and so let me just pull up the update here. So the multi-family buildings will be receiving their mask this week, and the single families will be early next week. We have masks, and Director Barnes, can you remind me how many masks we're delivering to each household? You're muted.
After all this time, I think that maybe first, second, maybe. Each household will get one box of masks, and I can give you the total number of masks that will go out in the next week. Just one moment.
I believe there's 20 in each box.
Yes, I believe that is correct. I'm looking at our last mask distribution real quick. Yes, I believe there's 20 in each box. I was going to give the total number. So we will be giving out 1,181, give or take, boxes of, I believe, 20. These are the high quality masks that have the bands behind the head. So they're really close contact. And then we will be doing the single family homes, and there are approximately 1,200 that will go out. So it's a lot of logistics, but we get them out pretty quickly.
Great. And the last thing I have is that it's almost the holiday season. And the town has made its budgeted donation for turkeys for the Thanksgiving food baskets. And we will be seeking donations of new toys for the annual toy drive. And those donations can be dropped off 24 hours a day at the police department, or we'll be accepting toys in town hall on Wednesdays from 8:30 till 5. That's all I have this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. If that's all you have, then let's move on to council, committee, and ward reports. Starting out with Councilmember Smith, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies if I have any technical difficulties here. I'm Zooming on an iPad for the first time, and apparently old enough now that I have to give technology mornings before engaging with it, which is always fun. Happy Halloween. As mentioned prior to the meeting, the Smith family household is a full candy bar household on Halloween. So if you can make it here during this meeting, I'll be happy to answer the door. And even Mr. Mayor will stay up a little bit later, so you can come get a Reese's or a Snickers if you'd like. As the mayor mentioned, it's early voting has started. So I encourage everybody to get out to vote, make a plan to vote, whether you're early voting or voting on election day. We have some great candidates, particularly a friend of mine. I'll just say Wes Moore is an old friend of mine. I've known him for about 15 years, and he's a wonderful gentleman, great leader, and looking forward to see where the election goes for governor this year. Also, as mentioned, the walk and talk, we had a great walk and talk through Ward 1 over the weekend or prior weekend. Got to hear some great feedback from constituents, point out some of the upcoming road projects and other improvements that are coming to the town. Want to thank staff for leading that, putting that together. It's very informative. We had a good group of people, and particularly heard a number of opinions about the lofts at Riverdale Park, which, as mentioned, we'll be discussing at the MUTC meeting upcoming as well. I'm interested in hearing from the developers at that MUTC meeting. The fact is, we need the housing inventory in our town to make sure our housing costs aren't getting out of control, but there are legitimate concerns with the project. And I think those concerns can be heard and answered and satisfied, but we haven't seen from the developer thus far the kind of community engagement that I would like to see to address those concerns. So I'll be looking forward to speaking with the developers at that meeting and reinforcing upon them that we need to see significant amount more of community engagement. As meeting, we all mentioned we also had the town seal design committee meeting next week, or last week, I'm sorry. We got some good history on the town seal from the mayor, who is always the oracle of all things Riverdale when it's not Councilman Lingua. And, some good history on, the outdated nature of our current seal and how it has several items that no longer exist in our town. So it's a good time to be redesigning that. We'll have another meeting on November 10th, at which we will set a date in the new year for a community input session, because we want to make sure we hear from the community, understand what they'd like to see in a new seal, what kind of story our seal should tell about our town. And we're looking forward to that and getting started in earnest on the Town Hill redesign. And we'll be looking a lot to surrounding communities or nearby communities that have recently done the same thing, such as Cheverly, to look at their processes that seem to have gone well. And hopefully we can come up with something that includes the community and everyone can be proud of going forward. And then lastly, I just want to say on the mask distribution, this is an amazing effort. I'm so proud of our staff for being able to execute this. Getting masks to every single household in the town is just incredible. And our staff amazes me with their dedication and efforts every day. And so as always, thank you, staff, for putting that together and executing it. And that will conclude the Ward 1 report.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith, and here for the hard work that staff puts in so many ways, but the masks are on top of their usual work, and they can't seem to handle it effortlessly. So I'm sure there's a lot of effort there, but they seem to do it effortlessly. So thank you. Let's move on to Councilmember Foe, Ward 2.
Good evening, everybody. To piggyback on top of the comments on staff, I don't know too many municipalities that have offered free tests and masks to their entire community, and it's just accommodation that they're always incredibly available and hardworking. So thank you for your efforts. I'll be brief. try to save the majority of my comments for next week's legislative meeting. I was just looking up, I received notification from Maya Davis, who runs Riversdale House Museum. They are unveiling a portrait of Adam Francis Plummer next Friday evening at 6:30 p.m. And I wanted to be able to share information on that. And I went to sign up and it's already at max capacity. Just speaks to the remarkable things that Miss Davis and her staff are doing at Riversdale House Museum, and appropriately providing contextualization to the history that exists here in our community. I was able to attend virtually the SEAL meeting and the history lesson that, and I reached out to both of them, but Mayor Thompson and Councilman Lengua are really incredible resources. And if you look around in this community, you will find people that are tremendously connected to the history of this place. And it's always a really remarkable lesson to just sit down and be able to listen. It scratches an itch that I have as a history teacher. And the first meeting of the SEAL design was really remarkable. And obviously I talk a lot, but it's sometimes nice just to listen. And that was a really good opportunity to hear that and to hear that discussion. So I want to continuously thank those residents and council members that participate in these events, because it really makes our town that much more inclusive. And that's a really nice thing. Voting. I saw, Mr. Mayor, you were already out at the polls working. Gratitudes for that. I always like to reiterate a story of my first time voting. I had a teacher who did not have similar political views to me that assisted me in mailing in my registration. The reason I was voting was the Pittsburgh Pirates were trying to increase sales tax in municipalities around Allegheny and Butler County by 0.5 cents. It is public policy that I would never, ever, ever, ever support to this day, specifically for that awful franchise. So viewpoints do change. But I remember the feeling that I walked away from the first time that I ever voted was I didn't know 95% of the ballot. You know what I mean? I walked away feeling upset with myself because what I was looking at was pages of information. And I'm looking at this year's ballot and it's 8 pages. It's 8 pages of information, ballot questions, initiative issues. It's really quite remarkable. And if you haven't done so, voting by mail, I find it to be, at this point in my life, precious, right? Because I get to sit there with my ballot and I get to ask people questions. My wife and I have made a habit of this because I don't know everything on this ballot and I'm remarkably more involved than I was as an 18-year-old student at Knox High School, right? I still get that feeling and I want to reach out to people that I trust. I want to ask questions about the ballot, and voting this way allows me to do it. So, I mean, if that's something that you're interested, please consider. Our state is really remarkable in the way that it allows people to access the ballot. And I really, truly, strongly believe in voting by mail because it allows me to approach this ballot with education at the core, right? I'm not just filling in a blank. I'm not just going party politics. I am becoming a more educated voter. And I think that's where we win. With that, hope everybody's doing great. I yield my time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Foe. It's it's actually nice as you grow older to know the issues a little bit better, know many of the people whose names are on the ballot. I actually was with delegate now. Mary Lehman was talking to people at the polls also.
It's really an incredible experience to know people on the ballot. You know, my perspective has changed wholeheartedly since becoming an elected. And it's just, for me, it's an incredible way to vote because I don't want to feel pressure.
Mm-hmm. No question. I like being able to sit there and think about some of that. There are a few ballot questions that I'm still mulling over. I have my ballot, but I haven't.
I mean, I believe there's 8 or 9 ballot questions, and I love the power of the initiative. I think it should be attached to our federal. But I mean, I know I recognize that would require a constitutional amendment, but I believe at the core of this country that people can decide issues that legislators won't.
It's true. It's true. Okay, well, thank you for your report. Let's move on to Councilmember Lingle, Ward 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Greater Riverdale Family Health Fair is going to be held on Saturday, November 12th. It's going to run from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's going to be at Parkdale High School. And for those unfamiliar where that is at 6001 Good Luck Road in the lovely municipality of the 20737. This event is a free event. So any family insurance, while they're all families are welcome, the insurance and IDs are not required. As I said, all services are free. Partners on this are the CCAR CDC, Maryland Health Department, Greater Riverdale Thrives, Metamorphosis, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, ICNA Relief, the GHEP, the University of Maryland School of Public Health, CAFE, and the Maryland's Physicians Care, as well as our beloved and outgoing District 3 Representative, Danielle M. Galeros. Again, that's from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Parkdale High School on Saturday, November 12th. They are, and the Greater Riverdale Thrives is still accepting health organizations, and tables are still open to organizations interested in providing services and information in health and wellness to the community. The person to contact would be Jeanette Mitchell, and that's at 301-318-3034 in order to reserve the table. As has been said by others, I would encourage folks to get out and vote. It's the best way. It's the best way to be heard. Not about and to make a bad pun on Halloween, don't boo, vote. So I encourage folks to get out and exercise this privilege and this opportunity in the coming days, and definitely especially by next Tuesday, the 8th of November. In and around the neighborhood, I've been receiving some calls from folks because they're seeing weekend repairs going on, and they're seeing operations, they're seeing things that are happening which there isn't readily posted. That little 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper saying that a permit has been pulled and awarded to do certain work. As of right now, I suggest folks, if they're able, to contact the police department. Again, this is usually happening on the ones at least on a Sunday. I tell them just to try and call or to go onto the website and report a concern as well. But I think it's something that in the coming year, in the next fiscal year, so I think this will be something for discussion among council to consider if we want to put into our budget an expanded amount of revenues towards weekend hours for code enforcement, which may entail a hiring of an additional or someone coming on as a part-time person for code enforcement. I think this is probably a discussion that council would want to have between themselves as well as with staff to figure out what the approach is going to be. And with that, I will conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua. Let's move on to Councilmember Siddiq, Ward 4, back from his travels.
Hello, yeah, I got back a couple weekends ago. A couple security things. Is the police representative on?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, so there's been ongoing concerns about the kids coming out of Parkdale and getting into the woods, and I understand some of that has been called into the police department. So it's still a concern carried over from last year. And the other concern is that there was a EMT response to an issue up the street. And I understand there may have been some parking issues, and I don't know how that dovetails with the parking discussions we're having regarding our community. But I don't know if you heard anything about problems with access to the emergency vehicles in that area or not.
I have not heard about access for emergency vehicles. That's the first time hearing about it. In reference to the situation with the kids leaving school, I did meet up with somebody from the school board. I think it was a few weeks ago at Parkdale. They did extend the fence. They did not extend it far enough. So I showed them exactly what it is we're asking for, and they're going to go back to see if there's money to continue the fence, if not all the way to Good Luck Road, almost to Good Luck Road, because really what they did prevents, no, absolutely, it doesn't prevent anything. As far as the parking situation, we're working on that. I do have officers that are up there directing parents not to be in the neighborhood to pick up their kids, to pull into the carpool line. Occasionally, a few slip by if they get there early enough. And also, obviously, it depends on how many officers I have working the street, because it's hard to dedicate somebody to just be up there simply for that. So we're doing the best we can, but we're hoping with the revamping of the parking situation that'll help with some of it. So we'll see. But I'll keep you posted on the progress with the fence, because that has been a project. I know we've been asking for a long time.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further to report.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Siddiq. Councilmember Mejia, Ward 5.
Hello, happy Halloween. I have no report for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Mayers, Ward 6.
Happy Halloween. No board reports at this time.
Okay, I think a happy Halloween is enough of a ward report. So we can go with that for both of you. Okay, so that brings us to public comments. Are there any public comments, typically on non-agenda items? But if you want to talk about anything, go ahead. And I will make sure I can see if any hands are raised.
Good evening. This is Donna Holland. I'm a resident of Madison Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to, I have been one of the residents here that has been having recurrent issues with students from Parkdale trespassing. I just wanted to say thank you for any effort to stem the flow of that activity. It has been quite disconcerting for a while now. So I appreciate any effort towards trying to remediate that problem. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Sure.
Happy that we have been working on it, and just as a reminder, there is a school board race for covering our district that's pretty hot right now, and so you should try to track down both candidates and get both of them to promise to pay for the fence to be extended.
Okay, I sure will. Thank you.
Good thing to do during campaign season.
Okay, thanks so much.
Any additional public comments? Okay, well, let's move along to the work session discussion items. And the first item is a fence permit request for a 6-foot wood fence at 4707 Sheridan Street, just down the street from me.
Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. As we discussed, there is a fence permit request for 4707 Sheridan Street. No action is requested tonight, just staff seek input from the mayor and council regarding regarding their position on the fence. The town received a building permit application from Mr. Vincent and Ms. Carol Klein for the removal of chain link fencing and the installation of a 6-foot tall pressure treated wood fence in the backyard of 4707 Sheridan Street. The applicant has obtained a Prince George's County permit for the work, and staff recommend approval of the permit for the 6-foot fence. I do know that the Kleins are here. If they would like to add anything regarding their fence permit, please do so at this time.
You guys are muted.
Here we are, sorry. Unless you have questions for us, I don't know of any questions that we have for you at this point.
Have you already paid to have the chain link fence removed?
No, but we intend to have it removed before the wood fence is installed.
We have a grant program that allows to assist with the removal of chain link fences.
That's right.
I left a message for you guys a little bit earlier.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we between the trick or treaters and getting.
No, I understand completely.
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to get to it.
That's no problem at all. I like to screen my calls as well. There's no problem with that. I just wanted to reach out and there's no problems with this fence at all. I would ask that we move it to the consent agenda. I would like to reach out to you guys with information about our grant program to help you out with a little bit of money. We always feel that that's beneficial. And we ask when building a fence that you just speak to your neighbors about that to let them know. We also love moving a chain link fence to a wooden fence. So we are on board with this and excited to see it move forward.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional council questions? Or public questions or comments?
Just one more thing. If you guys need anything, that phone number that I reached out to you with, please do not hesitate to use that. That's my personal phone. I'm available 24 hours a day. Just
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
So I just have one question. Director Barnes, if you could scooch it up so we can see the very back of the fence. Is that so on the very left-hand corner there's an 8-foot section of new fence, and is that I thought a whole 6-foot fence was put in. Did they not cover that piece of it for the previous owners?
Correct.
Okay.
One little section that's still chain link. And we were hoping to just make it uniform all the way around.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just curious because
it's a kind of a curious situation. I don't think you could see any of it until we cut down some of the bamboo that was there, and they weren't able to see what was behind it.
Okay, I think that the council actually approved 6 foot all the way back to the property line previously, but they may not have actually put it in if and that's what happened. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please put this on the consent agenda for next week, and unless one of your neighbors gets upset, then you don't need to come in. We can just approve it without you being here. So Aaron will reach out to you if there's a concern.
Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Councilmember Mayor, Lingua, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm going to ask the obvious question. I take it the applicants have conversed with their neighbors about their wanting to put in this fence?
On the back side, yes, but on the southwesterly side, not yet.
Haven't discussed it yet, but we'll do so starting tomorrow.
And they have a fence already in between us.
Okay. All right, I'm just curious. It's past experience has taught us that surprising neighbors is a good idea.
Certainly, yeah.
And
I'll stop over there tomorrow.
So wouldn't want to see this turn into a
we don't.
Yeah, we don't either.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda, permit parking program, discussion item 2.
Director Barnes.
Certainly, just one moment. All right, good evening again, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. No action is requested tonight. Staff seek input from the mayor and council regarding draft language for a permit parking program. As we've discussed for several weeks now, extensive community outreach has been done, and we've received a lot of input from our members of the community regarding the establishment of a permit parking program. Staff have compiled those pieces of input and actually have put together a framework for a permit parking program. So this specifically does not talk about the individual zones, like what street each zone would be. This actually provides the framework. And I'll give a quick overview of some of the highlights, and then we can go through the language if anyone would like, line by line. I know some folks may be here to hear that. So this will authorize the creation of a residential, commercial, and/or industrial parking zones. So it's not just residential, it's going to include commercial and industrial. This draft language includes the establishment of 4 zone types. So zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and that indicates the number of permits issued. The reestablishment, it also outlines the associated naming configuration, and that's pretty important when it gets down to individual areas, maybe even within a neighborhood that need to have different zones. It'll reestablish permit parking zones every 24 months. So the council will take action, and then in 24 months at the end of that permit parking time, the council will have to take action again to continue those permit parking zones. So that ensures that every 2 years, the mayor and council will review again the permit parking zones and determine whether or not they still work. The next item is that there's a process for designation of new parking zones. So this spells out how a new parking zone would be established. And then there is a section that talks about visitor and temporary parking permits. We may have already covered this timeline before, but I just wanted to mention that. So tonight we have draft language for the mayor and council to review. This has not been reviewed by Town Attorney Sussman yet. We're here to collect input and feedback, and we will take that to the town attorney to actually put it into ordinance format. Then at the November 7th legislative meeting, we're going to review that legislation and again, get any sort of input, hear back from the mayor, council, and community. And then on November 21st, we're going to hold the public hearing. We've talked about quite a bit required by ordinance. And the introduction of the legislation will likely happen that night. And December the 5th would be the adoption of the legislation, and the effective date would be December 25th. So on the front end, we collected a lot of community input, and then we're continuing to have multiple opportunities for community input on this framework. We also reached out to all of the permit parking holders by email and provided them with the schedule for the meetings and all the meeting links so they can participate as well. If we'd like to go through another main section that I did not mention is that we are recommending that permit parking is a separate chapter in the town code. So taking it out of chapter 64 and making it a standalone chapter. Pretty standard as we draft new sections of the town code. We have a purpose, a scope, and then definitions. So that makes it a lot easier for residents to understand. The next section would establish the zone types, and as we discussed, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and zone 4. It also designates that by resolution, the mayor and council will actually establish the permit parking areas. So once the mayor and council is comfortable with language here and we have that drafted, there will also be a companion resolution that will be the staff's recommendations for the current permit parking areas and how they would fit into zone 1, 2, 3, or 4. We talked a little bit about the zoning configuration. So it would be the name of the neighborhood, street, or area followed by the corresponding zone type. That gives us a little bit of flexibility. So any sort of proposed area, that's the next section of code, and that seeking the creation of a new permit parking area shall submit a petition to the town on a form provided by the town, and it will require approximately at least 50% of the residential units or businesses within the proposed area. Town staff or the Board of Traffic and Parking, I think we've talked about that a couple of months ago, would review the petitions, consider the characteristics of the area and the related information, and then make a recommendation to the mayor and council on how to proceed with this request for a new parking area. The other sections talk about permit required. A permit would be required to park in an area that's designated as a permit parking zone. It talks about the application forms, fee, and issuance, very standard language on how the permit parking program would work. I think we talked before, there's not very specific language on the type of permit, no hanger style necessarily. It really depends on how this works out. This would also be new for staff, having the 4 different zones. It talks about revocation or suspension. So if people are misusing the permit, we can take that back if needed. We don't allow, obviously, reproduction, alteration, or duplication of the permits. There's a discussion about failure to display. The visitor parking permits let's talk a little bit about that. So an eligible resident may not be issued more than 5 visitor parking permits per event and no more than 10 per month. So there is a cap or a limitation on the number of visitor parking permits. And it talks about the permit parking is valid for about 48 hours. And that's standard. I don't believe that is, I think it's 24 or 48 now. Tracy might have to correct me on that. We did have an exception for medical or personal care professionals providing services to a resident during the time period. So there will be room for exceptions for things of that nature. Exemptions obviously would be emergency or governmental vehicles, delivery vehicles, and then the penalties are already established in Chapter 64, Section 18 under violation and penalties. So again, the purpose is simply to provide a framework, a workable framework, and then to create the actual zones by resolution.
Looks like there are some questions. Does that conclude your presentation, Director Barnes?
Certainly, Mayor Thompson.
Okay, let's start with Councilmember Siddiq.
I just wanted, if you could scroll down. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and staff. Just wondering, and this may not be something for the ordinance, but for the police department, is how exactly enforcement for the permit parking or currently works or would work under this new framework. I ask because I think in my ward, the area most right for it would be on Madison Street across from DeMatha Catholic High School. We get a lot of, once the DeMatha parking lot fills up, folks going to basketball games or what have you, events over there, end up taking all the parking on Madison Street. But of course, that is frequently in the evening hours, on the weekends, and things like that. And the chief mentioned the difficulty of dedicating officers specifically for dismissal hours at Parkdale High School. I'm wondering, would this be like someone with the permit needs to call to have the enforcement done, or would our officers be making regular enforcement passes through these neighborhoods, and what the implication on staffing for the police department would be for that.
Chief Quixons?
Yep, sorry, I was trying to unmute. And excuse my background, but I'm on my porch still giving out candy, so bear with me.
No problem.
It's
At
probably
this
gonna end up
late
being
hour?
what's that?
At this late hour?
Oh, you
Heavens.
have no idea. My neighborhood, people drive into this neighborhood to trick or treat, literally.
We
It's insane.
we just had
It-
one a few minutes ago too. So
Yeah, it's insane. Anyway, it's probably gonna end up being a combination of the two where people could call and, make a complaint, say, look, it's a Saturday and, because we don't necessarily know the schedules and the
Sure,
days
sure.
that, it's gonna be the overflow issue, but it'll be a combination of our regular routine patrol and complaints coming in, if that answers your question.
sure, yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Well, and on the staffing piece, in your opinion, would this create any staffing concerns for your department?
Well, obviously, it's not going to be, a priority in the sense of if you're calling, if somebody calls to make a complaint, we're going to get to it. But if it's, we will prioritize the
Right,
calls as they come in. But I
course.
think as this program does expand, there's going to be, I'm hoping, I don't really want to even get into that, but I'm hoping this program is going to grow because we're going to, once we take over the Riverdale Park Station and everything else,
Sure.
it's just there's no choice but for it to grow. So
Right.
we'll
And-
see.
Okay.
Well, and-
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll go a little bit further than the chief. We've had internal staff discussions about revising the town's enforcement procedures as it relates to the parking program. And that relates not just to technology, but it also relates to appropriate staffing. And so we're working on that. And we will be incorporating a proposal in the proposed budget that we'll release to you all the first week of April.
And then, and Matt, have you guys given consideration to using, I'm not sure what the term is, but enforcement officers separate from our actual broader law enforcement police officers?
We are looking at that. Yes, sir.
Okay, outstanding, outstanding. And then just my last question is if we have the ability or authority, or if any thought has been put into this, I think we have a really good rule in my neighborhood where we still have the HOA owning the streets and the parking, where it's actually in our HOA bylaws that if you are using your garage for something other than storing a vehicle, you can, and you're also using the street parking with your permit, you can have that permit revoked. I don't think this, obviously that is not something that is easy or maybe impossible to enforce, but it is kind of, I think it serves as a reminder to folks hey, be considerate with the limited amount of parking that we have. Do we have the authority or ability to do anything of that nature with this new framework?
My initial thought is we do not, but that's something that we can talk with Mr. Sussman about.
Sure, that would be great. That's all I got.
One thing about those 80s babies, they
Someone has a live mic. There we go. Okay, are there additional questions or comments on the permit parking program? Are there any public comments on the permit parking program?
I would just say as an 80s baby, the 80s babies support the parking permit program. So we're in favor of it.
I was just in chat wondering, is this appropriate to ask about the 80s babies? I just thought it was good.
Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is the redistricting committee update. And I am going to fairly quickly seize the screen from Director Barnes. I always have a hard time finding the button here. There's all these buttons down there. Why do I find this so hard? do I have permission to do this? I really don't see the button there. App, is it under apps? Yeah.
Or it's the middle of the apps. We have a lot more apps in these meetings. You see share screen?
So it's in the apps?
It is. It's on my screen, it's in the middle. It's the little icons on the very bottom.
So on the bottom, I have participants, chat. Oh, there it is. I swear it wasn't there. Okay, well, we'll get this right eventually. Okay, are you seeing my screen? Okay, I see you nodding, so that is good. And now I have to find where my cursor has gone. There it is. Okay, this, I'm looking at my other monitor that has this on it because the monitor I was on for the main meeting has so many pixels that you wouldn't be able to see anything, or I wouldn't be able to see anything anyway if I were on the other end. So these are the current ward boundaries. You can see Ward 1 in magenta on the left-hand side, Ward 4 in orange on the right-hand side, 2 on the top in between those two in light blue. There's a teal for Ward 3, Ward 6 in dark blue, and Ward 5 in a sort of reddish orange down there. And this set of wards was established about 10 years ago, 2013, and was just a minor adjustment of boundaries from the 2000. And in 2000, the ward boundaries shifted dramatically. And that was because the Madison Hill community had come to be part of the town during the 1990s. And so there was a big change in population. And so there's a big shift in ward boundaries. And this time around, we have had another big change in population. We have had the K-Fritz development, Riverdale Park Station, come online, and all of the townhouses essentially are filled with people. And shortly after the 2020 census, Pilot House started having residents moving in, renting apartments and moving in. And from my understanding of the law previous to earlier this month, the Pilot House, because they weren't there in 2020, on April 1st, 2020, official census day, they could not be included in the counts. But I was reading an article about College Park's redistricting, and they were taking that into account. So I got on the phone as fast as I could with the town attorney. And in fact, he said that as long as the change occurred before the first election under the redistricting, that you could include those numbers in your redistricting. But you had to make the estimates of population more or less on your own. You wouldn't have the help of the Census Department in figuring out how many people live there. So the only major change is the Pilot House, but the Pilot House is a big change. So each ward before this discovery was about supposed to be an ideal number of 1,225, give or take a few. And the number of people in Pilot House was somewhere in the range of 300 to 400 people, 230 apartments, 300 bedrooms in those apartments. And so question of how many people are actually living there. And so this was a big topic at the last redistricting meeting. And the redistricting committee decided to assign a number of population to Pilot House of 350. And that, of course, messed up all of the maps that I've been working on up to that date. That many people, all the boundaries had to shift again. So here we are with the 2010 wards. And I had a map that I've shown the council previously that I called the less disruptive map. And that was where I was trying to sort of move the boundaries as little as I could. So again, in that case, more people moved in here. And because the boundaries have to cross over the railroad tracks where there are actual places you can walk across the tracks, then it could either cross over here or crossover and the town center. Those are the only two places where there are places to walk legally across the railroad tracks. And so what I did was I took this set of blocks and I bumped it in, and that required Ward 2 to rush in to fill that gap. And so parts of Ward 2 shifted that way, and it was actually a pretty nice map. So post the pilot house coming on, I tried to do the same thing, and I got a map to work, but it doesn't look like a reasonable map to me. And so many people will be seeing this for the first time. That's what it looks like. And just so you can watch how it flows, you can see that there's a very skinny piece of the magenta colored ward here. And this is all legal. It's even actually probably going to be a little bit worse right there because there's a house that is on that property that we have to get the whole property into the ward. But it's very skinny through there, barely legal, and it just looks a little bit odd. And so committee hasn't provided feedback on this yet. They've had a chance to look at it for about a week. But that's what that one looks like. So the other rearrangements that I have tried were based on guidance from the committee to try to link together the higher density dwelling units that are in Riverdale Park Station in the Cape Ridge development with the high density developments that are in Madison Hill. So both Madison Hill have parking issues, and Madison Hill and Riverdale Park Station have parking issues. They both have townhome developments, which have sort of different issues than the single families. And so I was asked to draw some wards that connected those two communities together. And so here is one of those. And as you can see, it is a fairly dramatic shift. I actually think that the boundary right here isn't quite right. I need to move it to the middle of that road, but it works okay. So this is one of the maps that does that. And as you can see, there's some interesting little hiccups down here in the near Ward, where Ward 5 currently is. Ward 5's boundaries did not shift very much, but that one did. So I'll just flip again back and forth. You can see that Ward 2 has contracted an area by a good bit, but the population is right. Ward 5 is essentially untouched, and Ward 6 has shifted, and Ward 4, the orange ward anyway, has also shifted. So that is one option. And I showed something that was similar to this at the meeting and said I thought that aspects of this could be preserved. The committee mentioned that keeping this this block together as one looked good to them. I actually, contrary to those instructions, looked at another version of that, which sort of cuts down into the neighborhood and extends Ward 2 across the river. Interestingly enough, this ward, the light blue ward, I keep referring to them by the numbers that I think of them as, but who knows what numbers they'll have. So the light blue ward is similar to what existed when I first moved into town. So the ward that I lived in reached across the river and included this neighborhood as part of it. And most of these boundaries are rough. There are certain places where you see little hollowed out corners where I'm trying to hold together the houses that I think communicate with each other. And so here, these houses mostly face onto Taylor, and these houses mostly face onto 51st. So I kept them in that ward. These houses face onto Sheridan Street and communicate mostly across the street with their neighbors. So those are the current draft wards. And I will tell you that making wards work down here is tremendously difficult. Again, with the barrier of the river, then any ward boundaries have to go across either at East-West Highway, at Riverdale Road down here, or conceivably up here at River Road. There are no other crossings that are in town, at least if I'm paying attention correctly. So that is where we are. The redistricting committee will meet on the 12th to have a community conversation, which is the follow-on before possibly poor weather replacement for the walk and talks, and is hoping to receive a lot of public input on these maps at that time. So that is my update. Are there, and I'll leave sharing on. Are there any questions that people have or comments? Councilmember Lingua.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any possibility we can get copies of these maps to look at?
Certainly. You know, one of the things that I've said is that I want you guys to remember that the council will be making the final decision, and so there will be multiple maps that are recommended to the council. But I'm happy to share these with you, and I'm happy to meet individually with council members and go over the issues and just work through the maps if you want to do that. So certainly reach out if you would like to do that. But certainly providing them I can do.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say these maps look reasonable to me, and more so, I just want to say thank you to you and the redistricting committee for putting in lots of hard work, long hours in the evenings on getting these right. Then finding out that none of the options were right and having to do it all over again. I know that is had to be a stressful experience. And wiping out most of the work that the committee had done in the prior meetings and starting from scratch. So thank you to you, thank you to the committee for putting in long, hard work on this.
It actually, it wasn't too terrible because the committee had sort of established some guidelines for what to try to do. And we're honestly sort of hemmed in by legal concerns with what we can do. And so the legal concerns of having approximately equal numbers of residents in each ward, and the geographic requirements that you have to be able to walk from anywhere in a given ward to any other place in that ward without having to step out of it. So that's why you have these geographic contiguity requirements. And I'm going to show you something that I am really quite proud of. I have to find the right one. I think it's this one. Yeah, I'm going to turn off this one. I'm going to zoom in here. No, I don't think it's that one. I think it's the other one. Yeah, there we go. So I had some concerns about the software sometimes hiccups on me. I had some concerns about this piece of the ward being able to walk to this piece, because yes, you can, walk along East-West Highway there, but it's pretty dangerous. I don't really feel like that's a decent connection. And so I was trying to figure out a way to make that work, and also to have this stuff work. And the way that it happens is that there's a footpath here, and it actually goes under the bridge and connects up with Powhatan up here. I think this is Powhatan. And that same footpath connects, oh no, this is Powhatan, that's right, sorry. That's Quesada, that's Quesada, I believe. And so this footpath connects with Powhatan. So these people can take the footpath down and then reach the rest of the teal ward, and the people living in the light blue ward can cross over the bridge and take the footpath up and reach there safely. And so that's the level of detail that I was looking at to try to make this fit within the legal requirements. As you know, okay, we can put the boundary right down the middle of that MNC PPC footpath. And it's tough. It's tough to make these maps work. It really is. Looks like I have a few more questions. I hope that the stacking of the hands is the stacking of how they came up. I wasn't paying attention. Councilmember Smith.
Sorry, that's a legacy handoff. What we're here.
Okay. Councilmember Foe.
I missed one meeting, one meeting, and it blows up everything. No, Councilmember Smith took the words out of my mouth. I just wanted to take this time to say thank you to Chris Fike, Kate Kelly, Ifeanyi Yang, and most certainly Mayor Alan Thompson, Councilman Lingua. It's the only time I've ever heard him refer to you as Dr. Thompson, but he full-throatedly advocated on behalf of your inclusion in this process, and your hard work and dedication is just remarkable, because I mean, we sit there and you change everything, but those 350 people deserve to be counted. And it's worthy of all of the work that you did prior to this, and then everything that has been changed afterwards. I just want to say thank you, because that's a committee that doesn't get a lot of attendance when it's meeting. I love listening to the dialogue. I love seeing those people volunteer. And I'm just really grateful to live in a town where, you know, we have volunteers like that and we have a mayor like this. So thank you very much.
Sure. And I think that we'll receive a lot of attention as this approaches the actual redistricting process. People are going to be very engaged when they figure out this is happening. And just so everybody knows, these sort of gaps that are here and there will be closed up on the final maps. Will have beautiful geometry, but I was just trying to get the numbers right and give the general idea. So that's why they're there. So if I can figure out how, because I don't see the quit sharing, then I will quit sharing. And otherwise, you're going to have to stare at my screen for the rest of the evening. I guess I could close the. Okay, I'm going to try closing the monitor and see if I can get the.
Director Barnes, are you able to?
Okay, are there any, my screens get happy again here. Any public comments? I talked to the council. Are there any public comments? Okay, don't see any, so we'll wrap that up. And again, the next committee meeting is on the 12th. We'll be part of the community conversations, and I encourage everyone who is concerned about this to attend. Okay, let's move on to discussion item 4, fiscal year 2023 revenue update.
Deputy Director Jones, if you can walk us through this, please.
Sure, thank you. Tonight's revenue report covers the current fiscal year up to from July up to October 28th, and covers the 3 previous years in that same time period. The first major category that we have is local taxes. For the current fiscal year, the total is $4,832,000. The previous year was significantly lower at $3,698,000. The year before, $4,213,000, and fiscal year 2020, a total of $3,744,000. So for local taxes, which consists of real estate taxes, personal property tax, local income tax, and operating tax, there is some fluctuation across the years. As far as the current fiscal year, we can begin with real estate taxes, which is 4001. If you notice, the total is $4,279,000, which is significantly higher than the 3 previous fiscal years. As far as this particular line item, this has been a very odd year. In the last revenue report that I presented, the real estate taxes were actually significantly lower. And as was mentioned, we had received word that Prince George's County would be late in issuing tax bills, and as a result, a delay in the town receiving those revenues. So typically, real estate taxes are received August, September, October, and November, where we would receive the majority of that. But the majority for the current fiscal year actually came in October and November. We actually didn't receive any revenue in September for the current fiscal year. So when we did receive revenue in September, we actually received more revenue than we have in the past in the month of October. So the expectation is that in the month of November, things will balance out and we won't receive as much as we typically do because we receive such a large chunk in the month of October. So essentially, we received revenue later than usual, but in the month of October, we received a little bit more than usual, and we expect that to balance out. For the next line item, 4008, personal property tax, the total is $211,000, which is down from previous years. The year before, $409,000, 2021, $623,000, and 2020, $507,000. So we do expect to potentially see a decline in this line item. We're continuing to monitor. Tangible personal property thresholds have risen, so the expectation there is we may not receive as much revenue as we have in the past. The next line item is local income taxes. Total there is $151,000 for the current fiscal year. For fiscal year 2022, the town received $116,000. The year before that was a bit higher, which is more in line with where we are in the current year, a total of $157,000. In the year fiscal year 2020, we had a local income tax total of $105,000. Okay, so the final line item that we have under local taxes is operating tax. For the current fiscal year, we have a total of $190,152, which is also up much higher than the previous fiscal years. The reason being is that Pepco, which is one of the larger operating tax bills that we have, was actually billed in the month of October. In the previous fiscal years, we billed that out in November, so it looks to be a little bit higher in the current fiscal year, but that should even out as well as we get to the month of November. So the next major category is licenses and permits, which consists of multifamily rental licenses, single-family rental licenses, building permits, business licenses for the county, parking permits, and lastly, alarm registrations and reductions. So the current fiscal year, we have a total of $179,000, which is up a bit from the previous year. Fiscal year 2022, $167,000. Fiscal year 2021, we had $181,000, and fiscal year 2020, $162,000. The next major category is administrative fees, which includes abatement charges and municipal infractions. For the current fiscal year, we have a total of $15,600, which is up significantly from the previous fiscal years. The neighborhood services team has been doing a great job ensuring that the town code is being upheld. So we are receiving more infraction revenue in the current fiscal year than we have in the past. The next major category is fines and forfeitures. We have a total of $18,115, a total of $13,125 in fiscal year 2022, and a total of $14,196 in fiscal year 2021, and in fiscal year 2020, 21,633. So we do like where we are as far as fines and forfeitures. 2020, we were at 21,000 and we saw that number decrease to 14 and then 13 in fiscal year 2020. And we seem to be trending back up to 18,000. So we're doing a good job in levying parking citations, issuing police reports, as well as vehicle impounds. And the last major category is community safety programs, which includes the Safe Speed for Students program, or our speed camera program. For the current fiscal year, we have a total of 276,000. In the previous fiscal year, that total was 351,000. So we were a bit higher. Fiscal year 2021, we were down at 206,000, and fiscal year 2020, 111,383. So in comparison to the previous fiscal year, we may not be receiving as much revenue for this line item, but it is an indication that speeding is in a more favorable position from a safety standpoint than it was at this time last year. So overall, the total for the current fiscal year is 5,322,000, which is up significantly in comparison to the last fiscal year, a total of 4,232,000. Fiscal year 2021, we had 4,616,000, and fiscal year 2020, a total of 4,089,000. So overall, the town continues to operate in a good financial standing. Having received the real estate tax revenue earlier than we have in previous years, we do appear to have more revenue than we have in previous years, but that's more of a timing issue. If in November, we expect that to balance out and look more in line with where we've been in previous years. So yes, that concludes the finance reports, the revenue reports, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Are there council questions for Deputy Director Jones?
I have none.
I thought it was a thorough explanation. I really appreciate the report also. Any other council members?
I'd agree.
Any members of the public? Okay. Be loudest, Deputy Director Jones. Appreciate that. Okay, let's move on then to discussion item 5, blighted property legislation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. One moment, I'm trying to get my screen set up here. Okay. Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. We've spoken before about blighted properties and vacant properties and how they are capable of having a profound negative impact on the community. Neighborhood Services has increased our efforts to address vacant properties and are proposing 2 ordinances to better equip staff to address these concerns. The first ordinance contains amendments to the Property Maintenance Code. The language of these new sections are included here in the memo. Yes, the vacant and blighted property additional authority. Sorry. There we go. Additional authority as to maintenance and security, providing the town manager or the manager's designee to have additional authority to address maintenance and security measures. There's a section 10822, securing with lumber, limiting the amount of time that a vacant property can secure the property with boarded windows and boarded doorways and other lumber. And the third section is on bamboo, prohibiting bamboo to grow without proper upkeep or spreading onto adjoining property or the public right of way. In addition to these changes and additions to the property maintenance code, staff is also suggesting a vacant building registration program. This would allow staff to more accurately track and inspect and ensure the proper maintenance of these vacant properties by And also have an up-to-date list of the contact information if there is not, if there is some sort of outstanding issue on one of the properties. The language of the draft ordinance for this program has also been added to the Dropbox this evening as well. But let me see, the vacant building registration program would also require that the owner provide future plans for occupation or future plans for the property if they are choosing to demolish it or have another purpose for the property, along with their vacant building registration application. That way staff have an understanding of when to expect the property to change. Staff are currently finalizing the code language with the town attorney for both the vacant building registration program and the additions to the property maintenance code. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time if there are some.
Thank you, Director Shelton. Are there, oops, there are questions, their hands up. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Shelton. I'm wondering if it would be possible to amend or change the language around bamboo to something that encompasses other invasive foliage. I'm thinking about kudzu in particular, which has a habit of taking over vacant properties, blighted properties, and making them more dangerous than they already are, and extending onto other properties. Is that something we could look into?
Yes, there is a section 3024 weeds in the property maintenance code as it stands that addresses invasive species and noxious weeds and other weeds like this. The weed section currently states that the plant growth shall not exceed 10 inches, and that's why there has to be some specific language for bamboo, because based on my research of how quickly bamboo grows, that would need to be cut at least once a day in order to maintain that. But yes, there is a section of the town code that already addresses those weeds that you're describing.
Outstanding. And then just one other thing, Mr. Town Manager, and you can respond offline if you need to, but this just reminded me of our conversation we had at the Walk and Talk regarding the state of some of the actually occupied properties on Maryland Avenue. Just wanted to see if we have an update on that.
Ryan, do you have any update from any efforts from your staff along Maryland Avenue? Specifically, what was mentioned that day was the pallets that were out there, the broken lights, the weeds, the general condition of those buildings in that industrial zone. And if not, perhaps we could provide the council with an email update after you check with your staff.
I think that would be the most thorough. Yes, I haven't spoken to them in a couple of days about that. So yes, I think that would be best.
Outstanding, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lingua, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question to staff is regarding the section in here that you're saying would be additional 302.4.1 on bamboo. Was there thought given to essentially prohibiting bamboo and having a sunset put in to allow folks to eradicate it before so as to be able to come into compliance?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question adequately. So are you suggesting that we should have a sunset for bamboo for every property within town?
No, I was just wondering if this is something that staff considered. Essentially, the prohibition of bamboo and giving residents time to address that.
I believe it was a it was discussed briefly at the beginning of our conversations, but because there are some property owners who are able to maintain their bamboo properly, we thought it was not beneficial to impose this restriction on everybody if some are able to do it properly, if that makes sense.
Okay. But we also, so you're not considering bamboo an invasive species?
Not for the purposes of 3024 weeds in our property maintenance code, no.
Okay. So you're considering it a native species then?
There's a lot of gray between native and invasive.
If I could chime in, council member, I think it's an interesting concept to say bamboo is prohibited, and for those who currently have it, we give you a period of time to get rid of it. Is that what I'm hearing? So if someone has a cultivated garden of bamboo, we would give them X period of time to eliminate that. Am I understanding your recommendation correctly, sir?
No, I was just wondering how this was, how what was the thought process on staff's thought process on bamboo? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, and because we certainly can talk with Mr. Sussman and get his take about just saying that bamboo generally is prohibited throughout the town.
Right. I mean, if I was going to say, I think that we should prohibit bamboo, and that I would just say I think we should prohibit bamboo. But I was just wondering, I'm trying to understand staff's thinking on this approach to bamboo.
Okay.
Because I mean, there are many people who could sit here and say this is an invasive species. And and it's hard to sit, and it's hard to argue that it's not an invasive species because it's not native to the state of Maryland.
Your point is well taken, sir.
I mean, it's gray area, call it what you want. It's
well, the thing I would say is that there are non-native plants that people grow and enjoy that are not invasive, and so it's not an issue. So the native versus invasive, I think we need to sort of steer carefully between those two. I'm sure that there are a lot of flowers that people grow in their yard that were imported from Europe that weren't here natively, but are routinely grown.
Tulips,
for example.
Tulips aren't native to, where dandelions are, yet dandelions can spread.
So it's my guess that the staff was considering the invasiveness and the nuisance factor of bamboo, because even dandelions, even though they may not be somebody's favorite flower, they do not do some of the damage that bamboo will do to structures.
True. I mean, I'm just trying to understand how bamboo is being defined here. If it's not native, okay. And it is, and the way that this is written up, this section is written up, there is an inference there that it is invasive. when you look at 302.4.1, you know, the inference there is that it, you know, by the use of the term, you know, spread, is that it is invasive.
Mm-hmm.
So we have other sections that discuss about not allowing non-native plants and invasive plants. I mean, is that, what if someone were to take one of these other invasive plants, say for example, the example given earlier by my colleague from the First Ward, someone who loves kudzu and wants to be able to work kudzu around a trellis or something, is that then allowed?
So Councilmember, do you have guidance for staff? Would you like to see whether, I mean, that staff has said they can.
Well,
consult-
I guess my guidance is just, you know, you know, a decision here on what is, you know, to present to us, you know, and then for us to consider, you know, what is, you know, a definition on what bamboo is.
I believe that bamboo can probably be defined legally. I'm sure that the town attorney can weigh in on that. And I believe that the issue, and the council member from the First Ward did bring up this issue of destructive, you know, invasive plants that are actually extremely disruptive, so that they can kill the trees, they can overwhelm a structure and cause structural issues if the structure is unoccupied, and that bamboo was particularly difficult, and so they decided to draw attention to it in particular. And so the question is, do you, other than kudzu, is there something that you think needs to be addressed in the same class as bamboo, or do you just want to have all invasive species, non-native invasive species? And some people probably think that poison ivy is invasive. It sure does get around. So,
well, poison ivy is native to the area.
Yes, exactly. So
no, I'm just looking for a clear definition on, you know, what is the approach to bamboo in the community? You know, a base point for us to go from, you know, unless we want to take this as the base point, but I'm not really seeing a clear definition of what bamboo, how bamboo is being treated here.
So can you scroll down to the language in the draft ordinance on this? So that's how it's being dealt with.
Okay. You know, it's interesting, you know, that I'm finding here, you know, what we get in our packages and what gets presented. I mean, this would be great if we could add this draft ordinance in our packages to review over the weekend. You know, I don't have this. I get the overview.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I'm not seeing this. What's
Okay.
on the screen right now? I'm not
Mr.
seeing
Mayor.
the actual item.
Mr.
You
Town
know,
Manager?
it'd be nice to be able to have looked at that over the weekend.
Okay, Mr. Town Manager?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
The town staff, we do our best to provide comprehensive information to the council in the packet every Friday before the meeting. Sometimes scheduling doesn't permit that. Sometimes working with Mr. Sussman doesn't permit that. We're not looking for a decision tonight. We're looking for input. We will come back to you at future sessions after the council has an opportunity to fully view and consider and digest this information. If it's the direction of the council that we should not bring any matters forward until we have the finalized information from Mr. Sussman, we can certainly do that as well. We're simply looking for direction. Thank you.
Certainly, and I've been trying to see what direction the council member wishes, and so and I think it's fine to bring things that are incomplete. Sometimes when we see a topic like this, and it's unclear whether you're seeking introduction of legislation at the legislative meeting following. I don't believe that this one is at that stage yet. I think this is an earlier stage of discussion, but it's complicated, and perhaps there may be aspects of this that are controversial. And so I think it's good to be discussing it in detail earlier. So I believe that you've gotten from Councilmember Lingua that he is interested in seeing a few possibilities for dealing with bamboo. Councilmember Smith also brought up other significantly threatening invasive species. And so if we can explore that with Mr. Sussman and bring us back information, I think that's the direction that we are providing this evening.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for me, sir. And we will do just that.
Okay. Are there additional council comments or public comments? Okay, look forward to making progress on that. Just before we leave the topic of bamboo, and when you're talking to Mr. Sussman, to my mind, there's an open question about what to do for existing situations where bamboo straddles a property line. And so if I can discuss that with you offline if you wish, but that I think that's something that we need to address, because it may be that it's primarily in one yard, but it's gotten some tendrils across into other properties, and are both people equally responsible? Probably not. So just something to consider. Okay. Unless there are additional comments or questions, I would suggest we move on to the next item, which is micro-mobility standards.
Director Shelton, if you could walk us through this, please.
I'd be happy to. Yes. There you go. Yes, good evening again, Mayor and Council, members of the public. In the past, we've spoken about VioRide, the operator providing micromobility solutions in town, and who is currently operating in town without an agreement. And as a reminder, VioRide has an agreement currently with other jurisdictions that they operate in, those being College Park, the University of Maryland, and University Park. At the recent legislative meeting, the Mayor and Council directed staff to establish standards for the operation of a micromobility business in town. One of the potential solutions to provide standards for the operation was a model agreement, but staff are here to recommend that these standards are established through the adoption of a permit program that would operate in a similar manner to our donation bin permit program. So in January of 2020, the town established the donation bin program, which created standards for where donation bins may be left and where what the upkeep requirements were. The micromobility permit would work in a very similar manner, but would include additional criteria for proper maintenance. Some of those criteria include the approved geographical boundaries of the proposed operations, the designations of area to leave the vehicle after use, requirement to provide the name and contact information of the on-site management or support personnel. So somebody for a staff to call if they do find something is left in an inappropriate manner. It would also require the company to provide for inspections of designated areas by the town, establishment of fees for noncompliance, and provide for the suspension or revocation of the issued permit if they are consistently operating beyond the program's guidelines. This proposed legislation would help hold these businesses accountable while also providing the service to town residents. Are there any questions or thoughts on the micromobility permit program suggestion?
I don't have any myself. Members of the council? Councilmember Smith, looks like you want to speak. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there has been any thought to this, but if there has, what is the thought on the designated areas to leave vehicles? Understanding that there are absolutely places in town that we want to say you can't leave vehicles, but also part of the main appeal of these micro mobility solutions is that you can get from pretty much one place to pretty much any other place. So we wouldn't want to I don't want to say interfere, but make it so that the purpose of that is actually impractical. If there's only 3 or 4 places around town that you could leave a scooter or a bike or whatever the case may be. The other thought I had was if it would be possible to require that if you are getting this permit, the places that you can leave or pick up scooters should be first be at places that are sort of transit hubs. I'm thinking of the Mark Stop in Town Center, where I know several kids that go to DeMatha will get off the train there and take or walk to the actual campus, and also the soon hopefully to be installed Purple Line stops that will be benefiting our town in the near to medium future.
Yes, so we have considered that there is a variety of ways, like you mentioned, that we could that the vehicles could be left. So there are some jurisdictions which have much more loose requirements. Obviously, everyone has requirements on not leaving it in the road and places that would be a danger like that. I know when College Park first established an agreement with VioRide, they actually had designated areas, even though they're not like a capital bike share where by design you have to go from one station to another. They actually had just established for their own sake a designated areas where you would take the scooters to and from. So there's really a wide variety of regulations we could come up with in order to designate areas to leave the vehicles.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to, as we move forward, the key to this is making our communities more pedestrian microtransit or oriented, basically getting cars off the road, because for the long-term future of the sustainability of our community and the whole planet, we collectively need to be moving cars off the road. That's just a fact. We need to create more ways, make it easier for people to do things other than drive a personal vehicle, whether it be mass transit, microtransit, pedestrian safety, things of that nature. So I think it's vital that we make sure that there is something compelling these companies and their users to ensure that there are always options at transit hubs where if you get off a Purple Line stop, a Mark stop, there's a high likelihood that there will be a device there that you can take for that last mile or whatever the case may be.
Thank you. Councilmember Siddiq. you're on mute.
I've used Veal Ride numerous times, and the way it works in College Park is they have designated areas that you are supposed to leave your bikes in. And if you do not leave your bike there, you're then eligible for a fine if someone complains. So those spots are designated on the app, and leaving them elsewhere, since they have your credit card, you can potentially get charged that fine.
That fine is VO Ride's fine, and I think that we might want to share in that so that they don't make money off of it as much.
As I recall, the language was, if the town cites you, we'll pass it on to you.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. I'm going to say that I view that the overall structure of this proposal is very good, that we don't want to be hashing out a new agreement with each new micromobility vendor. And so I'm happy for that. And I have a few other comments, but Councilmember Lingua has his hand up, so I'll let him take the floor. Councilmember Lingua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would agree. This is definitely a really good start. And to the points made, copying off other people's ideas about having established places, I think is something definitely to look at. And to the point about getting along ideal spots, definitely town center, definitely along areas at or near bus stops for folks. So in a sense that there's that connectivity that way. And also looking at different spots in town where it would be a good place to have a bike spot where there may not be actually a bus or a mass transit option nearby. Yet it would be something that would be useful to a particular neighborhood to have a site there. And as much as these sites, and I'm kind of projecting here, as much as I don't see them as being static. I see it that we could come up with a set of sites, and that might change over time. And I don't think we need to worry about that. If we find that a site's not working and we want to discontinue it, we should be able to. And if we feel like we want to add sites, we should be able to do that too. I don't think either way that's a detriment at all. I think it's just trying to be responsive in a way that's going to work well for the municipality as well as the residents and those users of whatever non-stationed, quote unquote, micro mobility they're using.
Does that complete your comment, Councilmember?
Period. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. That was actually something that I was going to suggest, is that we should probably ensure a process for altering the location of the drop-off locations with each of the vendors. There's an organization, the Strong Towns organization, that I'm a member of, and I used to spend a lot of time reading their stuff. That was before COVID, so I haven't been the last few years. And one of the suggestions they had was that the initial parking, let's say parking space for the drop-off locations be drawn in chalk, that you try them out, you see if they work, and you only put down the paint after you've sort of given it a little while to settle in and see where people are willing to put the bikes, put the scooters. And I think that having that flexibility and sort of a burn-in period for the structures is probably a good idea. I'm pretty sure that the vendors are not going to want us to be able to unilaterally change things without having a discussion with them and giving them some time to adapt. And so just having a process embedded in this program, I think is a good idea.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
what we may be able to do is similar to what we're talking about with the permit parking, is structure the ordinance in such a way that the designations would be made by resolution. And that way we can have the structure of the program, and then the council would have the ability to tweak that by resolution at any time.
Exactly, but we have to, tweak it in resolution in consultation with the vendor.
Yes.
There is another party in here, and we need to make sure that we're being fair to them. Saying, oh, by the way, we passed legislation last night, and this place where all these bikes are is now illegal, and you have to move them by close of business, or you're in trouble. Yeah, I think we need to. There are probably locations that may be difficult for them to keep stocked or pick up vehicles, and so we just need to work with them. So that's why it's a slightly more complicated process than the permit parking, but the general idea of being able to do it in simple motion is good. Councilmember Lingua.
Is this something where it would be good to consider, say, codifying a review and transition period for locations?
For when a new vendor initially starts, yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Or just like when the town wants to consider, looking at different sites, and as sites change, and you're seeing a demand in other areas where there's where there may not be pads, or something of that nature, that we have times when we have established if there's going to be new pads approved or new locations designated or undesignated, that it happens by a certain date, and that it takes an effect 60, 90 days later or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Sure, but again, I think we should have an opportunity for the vendor to weigh in on these changes as well as us.
Yeah. All right.
We're at least in theory partnering with them, and so we have goals of wanting to have people want to be vendors here. So I think that's good. Okay, any additional discussion of this, or do we wait for another round? Any public comments? Okay, let's move on to discussion item 7. Section 06 of the Personnel Manual regarding mandatory vaccinations.
Director Smith, can you walk us through this, please?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Regarding recommended edits to the Town Personnel Manual, Article O, Section 06, mandatory vaccinations. No formal action is required tonight. Rather, staff seek an opportunity to review the existing policy with the Mayor and Council and to recommend amendments. On November the 1st, 2021, the Mayor and Council adopted Ordinance 2021-OR-09 that established Section 06 mandatory vaccinations in the Town Personnel Manual. Staff successfully implemented the policy while COVID-19 has evolved. The risk to staff and the public continues. It's important to note, though, that there are differing views regarding the pandemic and responses to the pandemic, including safety protocol and vaccinations. Staff has worked with the legal team of our insurance provider, Legit, and tweaked the policy with a few minor changes. I'm just going to go down to paragraph 4, section 1. We made a few minor changes there. In section B, vaccination requirements as a condition of employment and continued employment and of fitness for duty. Each new and current town employee described in paragraph A must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 unless the employee receives an exemption. And here it was recommended that we insert and related accommodations from vaccinations for the town manager, for vaccinations from the town manager as provided in paragraph D. Employees who are not vaccinated, many may, it should say may, and I apologize for that mistake. Vaccination may not come on site to work unless they receive an exemption. Recommendation was to insert and related accommodations. An employee shall be considered fully vaccinated 2 weeks after receiving second dose in the 2-dose series, such as Pfizer and Moderna, insert or other approved COVID-19 vaccines. And we changed the language from there. And then we inserted 2 weeks after receiving the most recent booster dose recommended by the CDC based on your age, the vaccine you first received, and the length of your last dose. If you had previously tested positive from COVID-19, you may consider delaying your next vaccine dose, whether primary dose or booster, by 3 months from the date your symptoms started, or if you have had no symptoms, the date you first received a positive test. And then when you go down to paragraph 4, section 2, we inserted a provision to sunset the policy 12 months from the adoption of these amendments unless affirmative action is taken by the mayor and council to renew the policy. And currently staff leadership will review the policy as conditions change, and this review will continue. And we, yes, and the change in the policy will be in addition to staff review, and the policy will expire on a date certain without action by the mayor and council. And those are only changes that we are recommending tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith has a question. Or comment.
First of all, just to confirm, the recommended whichever the latest recommended boosters by the CDC, et cetera, that would include, for example, currently the Omicron specific booster.
Correct. We just used the language, and basically we took the language from the CDC.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And then what is the thought behind sunsetting the policy?
Because things have changed, things are always changing. We thought we would do it this way, and if it needed to be phased out, we can do it without going through a lot of paperwork.
Okay, I appreciate that desire and concern. And I don't want to make a thing out of it, and whatever action is taken would defer to the consensus of the council. But just personally, I don't see a reason of sunsetting vaccine requirements. I think it's a good idea for us always to require those things, not just to ensure that we aren't exposing staff to someone who isn't following the recommendations and requirements, but encouraging people to get out and fulfill the requirement. I say this because it occurs to me that I have not yet gotten my Omicron booster. I had COVID late in the summer, and now it's long enough then that I should have gotten it. If that were a condition of my employment, I assure you I would have gotten it by now. And I can promise the public and my fellow members of the council I will get it this week, along with my annual flu shot. But yeah, that was just a thought I had on that.
Right. We just wanted to make sure with everything changing and policies changing that we would have an option there. But once again, we would continue to review those, review the policy, and if conditions change, we'll review. If not, we would bring it back to the council for consent.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. You got a great name.
Thank you.
God loves us. He made a lot of
So, Councilmember Smith, I think part of the concern is just that, you know, this is, this piece of the personnel manual is about a very dangerous, a very communicable disease. And I think the idea is that if the vaccines get ahead of the disease or the disease wanes enough, that having this still in there could be become a legal issue for the town at some point. And so we need to figure out some way for it to end itself. But I agree with you. I think that it's a good idea for everyone to keep their vaccinations up. But you know, for something like shingles, you know, I can't imagine that we would have a legitimate business interest for requiring people to get a shingles vaccine. And so should COVID become something more like shingles, I don't imagine that, but should it happen, we need to be ready for that situation.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course. Are there additional council questions or comments? I have a few. I actually marked up the memo. I can find where I marked it up. There it is. Okay. First item. This I'm shooting from the hip a little bit. Is the other approved COVID-19 vaccine. I would actually think that we should say who's doing the approving. And so probably FDA approved is, I don't remember who gets the to put the last signature on it, whether it's the FDA or the CDC, but whoever it is, we should probably clarify who's doing the approving, because there are many COVID-19 vaccines that are approved in other countries. And we don't want people saying, you know, I got the Sputnik vaccine and I'm good to go here. Just as an educational point, there's a third approved COVID-19 vaccine, which is the Novavax, that's available right now, at least in principle. And so that's in addition to the Pfizer and Moderna. The other, let me see. Yeah. So in the third line on the bottom page here, I think it's not the length of your last dose, but the length of time since your last dose, that language shift. And the other thing is that the language shifts in just in the, I'm not an English major, so I'm going to get this wrong, but it shifts in the focus between the first part of the sentence and the inserted language. So, you know, employees shall be considered, et cetera, and then 2 weeks after receiving turns into your and you. And so I think that this language was probably lifted from the CDC website and just needs to be adjusted to match the rest of the employee policy.
Mr. Mayor, as someone who does have my master's in writing, I can vouch for your interpretation there.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure I had the wrong words for it, but I hope I had the right idea at least. And one last item, and I was thinking about this with the sunsetting of the parking policies as well. If you can scroll down to the last item. This may just be me being overly concerned about the legal language, but the issue of saying 12 months or 24 months, I just want to be sure that the sunset doesn't occur on the exact anniversary. So for instance, our initial policy was adopted on November 1st, 2021. And if there was a 12-month policy and we were meeting and we had adopted it on the 1st and we're meeting next year on the 3rd, then we would miss that 12-month deadline. And so if you can just check with with the attorney that the 12 months and the 24 months for the parking cover that eventuality. I just think it would be a good idea to make sure we sort of cover that edge case. And I think those are all my comments. Yes.
Right, thank you.
Are there any additional council or public comments before we move on? Okay. Next is ordinance 2022-OR-6 regarding changes to the ethics ordinance.
Director Barnes.
Good evening again, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. No action is requested tonight. This is just another opportunity to talk about the required changes to the ethics ordinance. So just to recap, the State Ethics Commission reached out to the town, all municipalities, to let us know that we needed to make some changes to our ethics ordinance to be consistent with the changes that were made to the state's ethics ordinance or ethics legislation, ethics law. And Town Attorney Sussman had drafted the attached legislation for all of his clients. So this covers all of the changes that were required by the State Ethics Commission. What happens after we adopt it is they actually do another review of the ordinance that we've passed and then bless it. If it's good to go, then everything moves forward. The only item I wanted to mention is doesn't impact the legislation at all, but the signature line on the version that was introduced was not correct. And also Town Attorney Sussman had commission instead of council. So I made those two changes at the very bottom of the ordinance for adoption. So those were the only other things. I did a side-by-side comparison just to make sure that we covered everything in the ordinance, just to double check, and everything looks good.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Are there council questions or comments? Okay, nobody else is asking. I will dive in. I know that these are basically mandatory, so part of what I'm doing here is just making sure I understand what's going on, since we all, at least in principle, have to change our behavior in response to these this new legislation. And so let's go ahead and sort of just walk through it. If we can go to 32-4, the new language, gifts from an association or any entity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that means that I wish I knew the reason for this change, but I'm just going to wonder about that, I think. So this means that we can't receive gifts from something like MML or Mako.
And as a former MML employee, this was bound to happen with the way that the vendors work at the MML conventions and things like that, raffling off different prizes. So prizes of value, and I believe the threshold is $20 or $100 altogether, need to be disclosed. And so that covers MML and Mako.
Okay, I mean, I would think that, a vendor gift basket would be covered under the vendor and not under the conference, but understood. But I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So moving down the next page, page 3, 32-5. Oh, I can't track it here. 2. So this says that if we receive some consideration from these entities, so University of Maryland Medical System, governmental entity of the state or local government of the state, I presume that's other municipalities, other counties, something like that, that if we receive something from them, then we have to report it, but that will not be given out.
Correct.
To anyone who asks for the document. Okay, interesting. Again,
I'm curious as well on that one. You must disclose it, but in turn, we have to protect that information.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one is just saying, what you have to do. That all makes sense to me. And then at the top of page 4. This looks like they're just trying to close some loopholes that people were jumping through for holding an interest in some corporation that might have a conflict of interest. So I'm not concerned about any of that. I think I understand that. And I think those are all my questions. So it all pretty much makes sense to me. Like you said, you know, I'm curious about what happened that led to this, but you know, I just want to make sure I understand it as we're passing it through.
Absolutely.
So if I were voting, I'd be ready to vote, but we have to wait a little while. Okay, any other discussion from council or members of the public? Okay. Only one item left under discussion items, which is the minutes. As usual, if you want to be sure that history gets right the things that you said and the votes that you took, you need to review these very carefully. Jessica will occasionally slip something in there maybe to have you say that you liked a different sports team than you really like. You know, you never can tell. So be careful to review those. And let us know if anything needs to be changed. So that brings us to new business. Are there any items of new business? No new business. Are there any items of unfinished business? No unfinished business. So we still have 2 hours and 17 minutes of Halloween to go, if I'm calculating correctly. So it's been fun spending the evening with you. I am going to go eat my Kit Kat and whatever else is left over. And I'll see you guys next week. Have a good week.
Have a good
Thank you,
evening.
everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Good evening.